Yes, sir. We are live now, sir. Please start.
Hi, good afternoon to everybody. I hope I am audible and visible. So it's my privilege to get an opportunity of presenting, and thanks to NPTEL to give me an opportunity to presenting in today's session. My name is Biplab Biswas. I worked with Capgemini, and I've been working since last 27 years in various projects in the IT field, and that includes one of the sectors is environment as one of my important sector. And I worked over 50 different projects, both national and international, in the environment sector. So whatever little bit experience and knowledge which I have gathered, I am going to try to give some and share some of those with all of you in today's session, which is on development with environment. I'm just trying to share my screen. Just give me a moment. Hope you could see my screen, right? So today's topic, as I told you, development with environment. And so to start with, let me go to a little bit, some kind of definition about the basic definition of the development and environment. So what is development? All of us know that any process that creates a growth or a progress or positive changes or the addition of physical, economic, environmental, social, demographic components. So what does that mean? For example, if we consider a land which used to be earlier, a land with garbage and debris, and one is developing that land for agriculture. So through agriculture, what are the changes? There will be changes of land use, and with embankment, the drainage, with vegetation or the crops that will be cultivated in that land, that will add the physical dimension to the land. Then there will be economic prosperity from the agriculture activities, so of the local farmers and the people from the associated jobs, right? So you will get some kind of economic development in the area. There will be improvement of environment, because earlier the land used to be lying with full of debris and all, and those used to cause the impact in the environment. So now environment will be better than before. There will be social changes from the large projects and the demographic components as well, because the agriculture will attract many people to shift in that area, where earlier probably the land use pattern was different, as well as the demographic components were different. So overall, a rise in the level and quality of life, which is happening. Now, if you see the definition, basic definition of environment is that it is a summation of substances and forces. What do you mean by substances and forces? So substances like the mineral nutrients or the vitamins, etc., like NPK, and where from you get these substances, and forces like, say, in the form of solar energy, wind energy, or water flow. So all these substances and forces are external to a living being. That means if I consider vegetation, it gets the nutrients and minerals from the soil, right? And it gets the water and air, carbon dioxide or oxygen, which is required for photosynthesis, and oxygen is required for doing this the other purpose. So that means all these substances and forces it is getting from external resources like soil, water, or air. But then these influences the living organism in such a way that it controls its life sustaining process. That means to live, one require these substances, forces, including solar energy, air, water, mineral nutrients. So that means these are actually essential part of a living being for its growth and development. That means the biotic part, or in this case, the flora or the fauna, and the abiotic part, which is the substances and forces, are intricately woven into the fabric of nature. So you cannot really differentiate between, or you cannot live without the environment. Although these are external for a living being, but it is actually influencing the life sustaining processes. So is it a myth? Is it a myth that development versus environment? So how can we talk about development versus environment when environment is an essential and integral part of a living being? So that means the development versus environment probably is it a myth. So there is no conflict between development and environment. One should consider development along with environment rather than versus development. So that concept is coming from the concept of sustainable development, where you develop, the development will meet the requirement of the present generation or present generation of living being without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own. That means the development has to be done uh, considering the carrying capacity of the environment. So what is the carrying capacity of the environment? That means it is the capacity of the environment to the extent it can support a biomass, it can support a change. So beyond that, we should not even go ahead with more and more development. So it should not be unscrupulous development that beyond the capacity of the nature, but it should be within the carrying capacity of the environment that it can support. That means in that case, any changes which is happening in the environment due to the anthropogenic activity or the natural activity are actually not going to change the equilibrium of the system. It is again coming back due to the nature and the natural processes by which it will come back to its own equilibrium, which is a very dynamic equilibrium that exists between the biotic and abiotic components of an environment. So I always talk about the framework. So what I said, that there is a framework which is called pressure state response relationship. So this framework is actually proposed and suggested by OECD. OECD is an international organization for economic cooperation and development. And this OECD's framework talks about pressure, which refers to the human activities or the natural activities as well. That means agriculture, that means industrialization, urbanization, etc., which is creating pressure to the state of the environment and natural resources. That means air, water, land, and the forests, flora, fauna, etc. And this is creating some kind of changes in the status of the environment, and as a result of which the environment is definitely going to be impacted. But then there is a response which is coming from the human being, and this response are done through the rules and regulations, execution of those rules and regulations, and that is actually a response from the society by doing some activities that is bringing back not only the equilibrium in the environment but also on the resources, and sometimes it is directly controlling the human activities also, which does not go beyond the carrying capacity of the environment. So this pressure state response relationship are actually shows that between the activities and the pressure, there are actually many to many relationships. That means one particular activity, as an example, anything you take. So for example, the agriculture. If we do the agriculture, that means I'm changing the land use pattern. I'm putting pressure on the environment on the water sector, because I'm putting the pesticide, I'm applying the fertilizer, and the leaching of those excess of the fertilizer is going into the soil, it is going into the groundwater, and the runoff from the agriculture is going to the surface water also. So it is impacting many part of the environment. So it is many to many relationship between the human activities as well as the kind of pressure it is generating among many parts or components of the environment. So once we do that, it actually creates or changes the environmental issues of state, many of which are commonly very well known. That means air pollution, water pollution, global warming, and also the soil pollution through the solid and hazardous waste management. And there are ecological. It is creating the ecological imbalance when it is done unscrupulously, and leading to some kind of calamities like, say, global warming, acid rain, ozone depletion, which some of you are aware of. And very commonly, it is creating different types of generation of the pollutants, like, say, sulfur dioxides or oxides of sulfur, oxides of nitrogen, hydrocarbon. Also, it gives rise to major greenhouse gas emission like sulfur dioxide or methane. And in urban areas, some commonly experienced thing is smog. Smog, that means a combination of smoke and fog. And we are all aware of the famous London smog, which was generated, and it was a catastrophe leading to a big disaster, and and that resulting in severe damage to the living organism as well as the human properties as well. Major man-made resources, another source of industrial pollution, which is called vehicular pollution or auto exhaust, and major natural resources such as volcanoes or forest fire, that also gives rise to various types of emission, creating the air pollution. Similarly, water pollution, where we talk about the point sources, that means industrial wastewater effluents and the domestic or sanitary sewage. So these are the point sources, because here we know where from and what is the source of the pollution. So like this, as you see in the picture, we can identify the source of pollution, that is point source, and the non-point source of pollution, like disposal of waste into the water bodies, indiscriminate disposal when we throw waste into the water bodies, or agriculture runoff. For example, on both sides of the Ganges, there's a huge or vast amount of land which is being tilled, and their indiscriminate usage of fertilizer and pesticides are actually creating the agriculture runoff when there is a water, and that goes to the Ganges. And it's very common. I'm giving you example of Ganges only, but it's very common across any river or large water bodies where it gets polluted from agriculture runoff. So these are non-point source, because here we cannot pinpoint the exact the source of pollution. It is a vast source, entire source, like agriculture land, or like different areas from where the garbages are thrown into the water. Similarly, there is a soil pollution from municipal garbages or construction debris or industrial hazardous waste, as you know, and the sludge which is generated from treatment of water or wastewater, and there is e-waste and biomedical waste also. Biomedical waste which are generated from hospitals and other healthcare institutions, and also the global warming, where there is a sudden rise of increasing temperature since last 150 years. So all of us know that there is a greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, methane, oxides of nitrogen, and these gases, when these are generated and increasingly, this quantity of these are increasing into the air environment. So what happens is that these allow the short waves or the microwaves from the solar from the sun to come in. But once these waves are coming in, some part of those waves are getting absorbed by the soil, and the rest part is gets reflected. So what is getting reflected out, those are actually the long wave, and these long waves are not allowed to go by the carbon dioxide, methane, and oxides of nitrogen, this kind of greenhouse gases we call it, creating temperature rise. And there is a possibility that in the next 50 years there could be rise in temperature of 2 to 3 degrees centigrade, and that creates the overall global warming with consequent natural disaster. For example, flooding, melting of the ice cap, we all know, in the North Pole and South Pole. And there is e-waste. E-waste is one of the most latest category of waste which we have identified. It's a big problem. For example, Toxic Link, which is a Delhi-based non-government organization, they have identified that India annually generated about 1.5 billion worth of e-waste. What to do with such a huge amount of e-waste which are non-biodegradable? What is the way of disposing them or recycling them? And similarly, there is a Bangalore-based NGO which has computed that there is around 8,000 tons of estimated e-waste generated every year. And the IT industry being one of the biggest or largest source or contributor, because 30% of the equipment, whether it is monitor, whether it is computer, of the servers, the network equipment, etc., those get generally obsolete every year. 30%. Just imagine the volume of waste, e-waste, this IT industry generating. Then this computer monitor television set, they also has they mostly these are made of non-degradable kind of material, and it includes some of the heavy metals and precious metals also, like gold, platinum, cadmium, mercury, etc. But those are not economically extractable, rendering it difficult to process those minerals. So what will be the process of their careful treatment and disposal? So that's another challenge to the human being. The acid rain, all of you know, basically the normal rain pH is about 6.0. So when the industrial emission like oxides of sulfur or oxides of nitrogen get mixed those with the rainwater, then it makes or rendered the rain acidic to a pH of about 3 to 4. So this rain, when it comes and drops into the soil, it actually creates the three different kinds of pollution. So one is the acid rain is actually a combination of air pollution, where the oxides of sulfur and oxides of nitrogen, this kind of acidic gas, are emitted and get mixed with the water. When that water falls, it creates the problem of the changes the soil pH. So soil becomes unusable, becomes acidic in nature. So creating a big issues with the crop, with the soil pH change and the soil characteristics change. So crop growth and as well as leaching up those many of the nutrients material to the groundwater, as well as when through runoff it goes out to the water, then the water bodies also becomes acidic. So that means it is impacting air, soil, as well as water, and that leads to death of aquatic life in water bodies or damage to the trees and plants, which I mentioned earlier. In addition to the erosion and damages to the monuments, buildings, etc. And then there is ozone depletion, where the use of ozone depleting substances like ODS, like CFCs, or chlorofluorocarbon or hydrofluorocarbon, due to the human activities, which we use increasingly in cooling towers or coolers, or the refrigerant gases or the aerosols, etc. And these actually leads to the destruction of the stratospheric ozone. Ozone otherwise are like preventing the harmful radiation, and hence preventing us from the harmful radiation. But this ozone are getting impacted from this ODS by oxidizing this chlorofluorocarbon or hydrofluorocarbon, as a result of which there is an ozone hole which is created, and that is leading to penetration of harmful UV radiation to the Earth's surface, leading to various diseases like skin cancer or melanoma, cataracts, decreased immunity, etc. Similarly, to all these things, to all these different kinds of pollution and the activities that is impacting the environment are getting response from the society. So it is called three-dimensional model of societal response to sustainable development, which includes the first dimension is decarbonization, second dimension is decentralization, and third dimension is called digitization. So what is decarbonization? All of us know that how do we ensure that our activities are optimizing the generation of the carbon dioxide. So it is done through green design, green manufacturing process, or green purchasing, and also the process of waste management, which is a 3R process: reduce, reuse, and recycle. and that is including the safe and responsible disposal of the waste also. So while every corporate sector and the government organization now are focusing on decarbonization, they're actually creating what we call a dashboard and database of the decarbonization and changes of this year on year or within quarterly. What is the improvement which is happening for a corporate that is being done? And then decentralization is the process where the development process is actually uh, trying to be decentralized instead of centralized development, as a result of which uh, all the activities which is happening in a centralized area are creating a huge pressure on the environment of that area, which is leading to failure of the carrying capacity of the environment. So instead of all development supposed to have in the cities like Mumbai, you do development, decentralize the development. As a result of which you can do it in Pune, you can do it in Nasik, you can do it in Nagpur, create a new Bombay, which is already being done. So decentralization of the development activities so that those are at par with the carrying capacity of the environment. And the third, the latest, is the use of technology, digital technology, so that the process can be improved, process can be made faster, and as a result of which the traditional process, which actually impact the environment in a much bigger way, are getting updated or upgraded, or smart process, by application of the technology, including the digital levers. So there are various agencies now. The agencies, both the international agencies as well as the national agencies, which actually create this some kind of response. So each of the agencies has got their own guidelines and all, but very common thing, three things you can see. One is that they have environmental strategy. Each one of these, whether it is World Bank or United Nations Environment Program or Asian Development Bank or OECD, each one of them have created the environmental strategy, okay, so that strategy or guidelines towards how to conserve environment, how to do the activities, development activities in a sustainable manner within the carrying capacity of the environment, and also they have developed some kind of standards which actually help to contain the activities, to measure the impact of those activities on the current environment and take corrective actions when it is going beyond that those standards. And the third is like they have also created some kind of database, and each one of them have got database for the areas they are working. And to be honest with you, although there is some degree of competition between this agency, there is always a sharing of this data. I have closely worked with World Bank and Asian Development Bank in some of these projects, and as their consultant, and also closely worked with UNEP. From that experience, I can tell you that there is a huge and vast amount of information and knowledge repository is already available with each one of these agency, and that helps in determining the environmental risk of a country or a region, and what sort of measures that need to be taken, what kind of projects that need to be taken to adopt or adapt by the executive agency, so that the environmental damages can be minimized, and the sustainable development can be approved. Towards that, each one of these agencies do have different types of grant or loan, which is given to various government bodies, particularly as implementing agency, in order to execute those programs as well. And like say, for example, Asian Development Bank, just to tell you that they have got a huge amount of database on environmental indicators, which they have created for all the Asian Development Bank member countries in the Asia Pacific region. And they have their operational directives 2013 to 2020. And these operational directives tell very clearly the do's and don'ts in the entire project life cycle. So starting from concept of a project, what needs to be done and what kind of measurement to be in place to find out the environmental and social viability of the project, and what are the measures, safeguards, and measures need to be taken to ensure that those are done as per in an environmentally sustainable manner. Similarly, the OECD also has developed some kind of database like OECD.stat that includes data and metadata for the OECD countries and selected non-member economies as well. So these environmental indicators we'll talk about a little bit after a couple of minutes. These environmental indicators, there is a handbook also published by Asian Development Bank, which one can go through, known as Handbook of Environment Statistics, that talks about how the environmental indicators have been developed, which I'll give you some example. And there is national agencies, many of you may be knowing about it. So at the helm, the Ministry of Environment and Forest, Government of India, they are the nodal agency for planning, promoting, and coordination and overseeing all the implementation of the environmental policies. So they have come up with various policies of the environment, as well as various guidelines and standards, etc. But mostly towards climate change, biodiversity, afforestation, etc. And under the Ministry of Environment and Forest, at the central level, there is Central Pollution Control Board, who are mostly responsible for executing the pollution control programs of initiatives as per the guidelines published by Ministry of Environment and Forests. So at the central level, that means there is Ministry of Environment and Forest and Central Pollution Control Board. And under Ministry of Environment and Forest, for each of the state, there is a Department of Environment, which works, which basically are responsible for similar activities in the state in Government of India. Similarly, under Central Pollution Control Board, there are State Pollution Control Board who execute the various programs of Central Pollution Control Board. That includes the National Air Quality Monitoring Program, NAMP, or National Water Quality Monitoring Program, or Noise Pollution Measurement Program, and Solid and Hazardous Waste Management Program. So each of these programs measures the ambient air quality or ambient water quality. They have got a huge, large number of monitoring stations where the data of the current environment status, including air, water, and noise, are continuously being measured. And some of you have seen that in various cities, there is a dashboard which actually publishes this result on a real-time basis. And the Central Pollution Control Board has also come up with environmental standards about different programs and projects. There are 17 categories of hazardous industry, and each one of those have to meet essentially their air emission standard, as well as the water discharge standard as well. And also Central Pollution Control Board has formulated various standards which are like the existing ambient air quality standard. So what should be the standard of air quality for an industrial area or for a domestic area? What will be the noise level during the daytime and during the night time, as an example, as well as they have also created a database called ENVIS, Environmental Information System, which is created by CPCB, Central Pollution Control Board, and sponsored by Ministry of Environment and Forest. And this database actually helps the environmental planners, decision makers, and the research institute to formulate the projects to identify the risks, to identify from the anthropogenic activities, and what sort of measures that is required to be taken, what sort of projects that are required to be taken in order to control or minimize the damages which is created due to these anthropogenic activities. Now, at the corporate level, every corporate has come up with their environmental activities or objectives, and with a defined target for the next 3 years or 5 years, etc. Like those are actually necessity now. It is not a theoretical matter, but necessity. For example, energy efficiency improvement or use of alternative resources. Everybody is having now. Almost everybody has the solar or wind energy as an alternate energy. Optimize for their water consumption, because the water taxes are going to increase, and it is increasing also every day. So how to reuse or recycling of the wastewater, promote environmentally compatible disposal of waste, otherwise they have to pay fine, including e-waste, and minimize carbon footprint or resource use per employee. This nowadays they have to give what is their carbon footprint numbers every year actually to the regulatory agencies, and augment the biodiversity and habitats by helping to improve the environmental process and environmental standards. Now there is to this extent, I would also say that financial institutions like banks, which actually provides loan and also takes part as as partner to various large projects. That projects could be a power plant project, that could be an infrastructure project, for example, bridges or highways, etc. The environmental and social impact assessment are actually carried out by them. So there is a process called environmental impact assessment and environmental management plan, and the guideline of which for any development project, the guideline of which have been promoted by Ministry of Environment and Forest, and one had to get a permission or approval from Ministry of Environment and Forest to implement that project. So if the banks are putting some money either in the form of loan or grant, or they are taking part as a partner, then first they have to identify whether that project will go through, whether those will be approved from environmental social point of view. So they do use a system called ESMS, or Environmental and Social Management System, which are used in order to do the risk assessment of the project in addition to the financial risk or rating as computed and calculated by CRISIL. So that's another thing which has come up recently, and some of the banks I know because I have worked with them on such kind of project. There is being a part of Capgemini India, I just like to highlight that at the corporate level we are also doing the water consumption about and we are also having rainwater harvesting for all our the new facilities or buildings which we are developing, our own building. Membrane filtration RO plant are very common for almost all the corporate enterprises, including us. And we have the waste management process, including the organic waste converter, that means, and biogas plant, including the vermicomposting also in almost all our facilities. And various awards also we have achieved, we have received from ASSOCHAM. And there is renewable energy, for example, solar energy particularly, which is actually 17% of our total energy is derived from the renewable energy like solar energy. And our target was 20%, and we have exceeded the target in 2019. In fact, one of our facilities generates so much renewable energy that when there is a surplus energy, it is actually adding it to the government grid. The green energy is actually being added into government grid. And we have also carbon emission target to reduce it, but by 30%. We are very close to not only meet but also exceeding that target. So these are various kind of sustainable programs taken by Capgemini India. Now a very brief about the environmental indicators. As I was telling you that there are what is environmental indicators? So environmental indicators are actually the indicators which is derived in order to identify whether it is the current status of the environment, or what is the extent of damage from the activities, anthropogenic activities on the environment, or what is the impact of environmental measures or environmental management measures that have been taken on the environment. So on various different types of pressure, state, and environment, there are environmental indicators. So there are pressure environment, state environment, as well as the response environment, as per that framework that I mentioned before. And how these are computed? These are computed like this in a different, in a pyramidal manner. So at the bottom of the pyramid, there is raw data. As an example, if I am measuring the pollution from vehicle, then raw data will talk about every vehicle. What is the emission of carbon dioxide, emission of sulfur dioxide, emission of oxides of nitrogen, or SPM, suspended particulate matter, for each of the vehicles. Then the process data will be actually how long each vehicle have been done, and how many of such vehicles of different categories are running, and the type of the raw material they're using, whether it is petrol or diesel or other forms of energy like battery-driven vehicles which are being run. So those will give us the total quantity of pollutants, and then like when you do the environmental indicator calculation, then that actually talks about what is the total amount of air pollutant being generated from a city, and then environmental indices which talks about the contribution of the air pollutant on the overall environment, and finally it comes to environmental index, which we call the green index many a times, where we actually define that what is the impact of the environmental changes on to the GDP, per capita GDP. What is the impact? Because for every environmental damage which we find out in this case, for example, what is the total quantity of air pollutant generated from the vehicular pollution, so that to curtail that, we need to spend a huge amount of money. So what is that monetary effect on the overall budget or overall GDP? Those are computed at the top level, which is called environmental index. So as I was telling you, this is the process, raw data collection or monitoring, which I explained to you, that is being done. For example, in India, for groundwater, for air pollution, different cities are monitoring those data, or for different water bodies, the water pollution is being monitored. So these raw data collection is the monitoring, then data processing, and this data processing is done to compute the next level or aggregation of the quantification of the pollutant, and for that they have developed that database. Each nodal agency is actually monitoring by getting these raw data and processing the raw data using the database or the knowledge repository. From there, they are computing the environmental indicators. I will tell you how technology is being used to do that. And then they are assessing against the benchmark. This is the benchmark, meaning the standard which different nodal agencies have come up with, and based on the usage of the natural resources, and based on the type of entity, whether it is industry, whether it is a city or country, whoever is doing it, and against the assessment, what is the need or where is the area where we need to improve. So they are finding the improvement, and once the improvement is done, then again raw data is being collected. That post depletion of post deployment of these management measures, what is the impact of the current monitoring, whether it has made sure that the improvement is done, which is actually getting collected or corrected through this raw material collection again. And this is the actually this is environmental indicators project, which is called RITA, or regional technical assistance kind of project, which has been done by OECD and Asian Development Bank, which is like a handbook of environmental statistics, is actually detailing it out. I was fortunate to work on this project for 14 countries as a consultant to Asian Development Bank. So I was mentioning about these environmental indicators. So indicators of environmental pressure, indicators of environmental state, and indicators of environmental response. So this, environmental indicator pressure talks about integration of environmental concern into sectoral policies for each of the sector, whether it is agriculture, whether it is urbanization, whether it is forestry or natural resources, and the indicators of environmental condition tells us where are we in terms of environmental performance, and there is databases, as I told you, which have been developed by various international as well as the national agencies, and indicators of response gives us the reporting on the state of environment. That means what is the impact of this response on the current environment. That kind of state of the environment report, which are published by every country. You will see that in that book of handbook of environmental statistics. Then being from IT, I wanted to briefly describe what are the role of IT in environment or sustainable development. So many of you are actually aware of this technology like big data and analytics. It is being used for environmental management system or environmental database. I talked about environmental database and knowledge repository, and computation of environmental indicators, and presenting that in the form of real-time dashboard. Some of these dashboard you can see on a real time. For example, air quality, in various cities on the roads, right? So that is actually a sort of dashboard which uses the analytics, and internationally the kind of satellite environmental database is available, which are hosted on cloud, either this environmental management system or hosting of database, which are hosted on cloud. So cloud is being used in order to host those dashboard, which can be accessed by the users to see at any time what is the current environmental condition for the stations where it is being measured at a country level, at a regional level, or at a local level. Then remote sensing and GIS, which is actually giving us the three-dimensional aerial view of the state of environment. It is being used hugely, actually, in a very big way by various enterprises, which is running, say, for example, pipelines of the water corporations, or the industries that they are treating and distributing water. So water utility company, or the electric utility company, or oil and gas pipeline, to find out, okay, what is their pipeline condition and what are the leakages which are happening from those pipelines, and the impact of those leakages onto the water, or onto the environment, surrounding environment, for example, forests. So also it gives us the overall status of the environment, like flooding, desertification, and then using this data, we are putting the various kind of artificial intelligence or machine learning kind of solution to predict the environmental events or calamities that might happen in future. So if we do this proactively, then we can actually identify what kind of solution that requires to be deployed even before this kind of events happen. So there is proactive detection of those environmental events or calamities, like detection of leakage and spills proactively, and take proactive measures as well as the corrective measures, and it helps in this way the environmental risk management. Cloud, I have told earlier, and the latest is in blockchain, where we are tracking or sharing environmental information and doing a self audit. For example, if a kind of waste is being transported from source to the final disposal, then tracking at every transfer point of those waste are actually being done using blockchain, because blockchain gives us a very transparent manner, and it cannot be manipulated. As a result of which, that helps in tracking of the pollutants or the resources from the source to the sink. As an example, there is a act floated by US Environmental Protection Agency, or US EPA popularly known as, called RCRA, or Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. And it has got a vast use, including the usage of biomedical waste or the hazardous waste from the point of its generation through transfer through different transfer points to the final point of disposal, to check and avoid the spillages of those hazardous waste and the solid waste kind of material within US. So these are in brief actually the usage of technology, and I know that I'm running short of time, so I would end up in saying that there has to be a roadmap to a sustainable coexistence between the biotic and abiotic factors, and that cannot happen unless and until we are serious about it. So we must behave and act in a responsible manner to ensure that the environment and natural resources can support life on Earth for many hundreds of centuries to come. So nothing is permanent in nature. So we can only pledge for its long-term existence through a well-coordinated and coexistence between the biotic and abiotic factors. And this kind of knowledge and appreciation has to start from the very childhood of a human being, so that like it is bolt in into our head and our radar from the very beginning, and we follow this throughout our life. With this, I will stop here, because exactly I'm on time, I think. And thanks for giving me a patient hearing. And I hope I didn't bore you much. So let's open it for discussion and question answer session. Thank you. Yeah. So one question I got from Purti Saxena from Kanpur, Uttar Pradesh. So what question you have asked is how we can stay environmental friendly with sustainable amount of development. As technology expert, ultimately where we are doing, what we are doing is impacting our environment. You are absolutely right. What we are doing is impacting our environment because we are not considering environment as part of our development process. Think of exploitation of water from the river. If we are thinking that, okay, with our current traditional process, X amount of water is required, and we are taking that water from either groundwater or surface water without even considering the recycling of it. So if we design our process in such a way which actually requires minimum amount of water, then whatever water is being used in the process and whatever is coming out as wastewater, if we are treating it properly and then recycling or reusage of it and then disposal is being done in a proper manner to ensure that these disposal standards are maintained, then in that case, it will not create much damage to the environment, and as well as like if we are ensuring that the rainwater harvesting, as I told you, is one of the areas for each of the new buildings nowadays coming up. The government is also talking about rainwater harvesting is a must for any new building to come up. If we are doing that, then that means we are actually helping our nature to conserve the water, so that that water will give us the, or meet us the future requirement of water. So as I was telling you, the green design, we are or recycling or usage of water, treatment of wastewater and recycling of it, and the design the process in such a way that the quantity of water today is required is much less. I will give you one example. We went to do an environmental audit of one of the engineering firm, where we saw that cooling water is actually, like cooling the hot ingots being developed in a blast furnace, and that cooling water is once cooling and it is going after one round of cooling, it is actually being discharged or disposed of. Just imagine the amount of water which is getting lost from the environment, and again they are, drawing the water or pumping the water from the borehole, so depleting the groundwater in that manner. So through that environmental audit, we identified that a huge amount of water are actually post cooling can be put into, in a cooling in a storage area where the water can lead to, can be subject to the natural cooling, so that the same water can be recycled. Of course, there will be some loss through evaporation, but with the help of rainwater harvesting in the entire plant area, you can actually recharge the aquifers or the groundwater from which that particular plant was not taking out. And it helped the plant also to save water, because for every quantity of groundwater it was withdrawing, it had to give or pay to the government a charge, right? There's a water withdrawal charge also given to the government. It was saving the water as well as saving the environment as well. So that way, and that kind of see, it is very easy. It's nothing difficult or something special which we have done there. But it is just a third pair of eyes through environmental audit we identified, and then help them in designing that recycling of that cooling water, so that total quantity of water usage for the entire process becomes much less and environmental friendly. Any other question? We still have 9 minutes to go. So any question from you will be most welcome. I would like to give you response to examples of the actual projects where we have done, wherever possible, of course. If there is no other question, I would request the organizer, please suggest if we can close the call. Anybody from NPTEL?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was asking that there is no other question. If there is no other question,
Yes, sir.
then
We can wind up, sir. Now.
then we can wind up. Yeah.
Yes, yes, sir. I will stop the live now. You can
Yeah.
do the conclude notes, sir.
Okay. And my request to all of you that if you have any other questions, see, it was a very limited time, 45 minutes, so you cannot cover. Environment is a very vast subject, as you know. So any other questions or queries you can send later on also. I would love to answer those. Thank you once again. Thanks to all the participants who ever attended this call, and thanks to NPTEL team to organize it in such a nice and efficient manner and give me an opportunity. Thank you once again. Bye for now.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Thank you.